Well, good morning, members of the Joint Conference Committee. It is good to see you here this morning. Pursuant to our rules, the Senate starts the first day of chairing. But in light of the history of these Joint Conference Committees and where the body currently is, I have elected to defer the first day of chairing to Representative Larson, my co-chair.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. So, Dawn, let's go ahead and do roll call.
Senator Dockstetter. Senator Driscoll. Here. Senator Garou.
Here.
Senator Jones. Here. Representative Nicholas.
Here.
Representative Summers.
Here.
Representative Stith.
Here.
Representative Walters.
Here.
Co-Chairman Nethercott. Here. Mr. Chairman.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Madam Chairman, before we start with staff, is there any pre-meeting words of advice that you'd like to share with us, or?
Mr. Co-Chairman, I look forward to working with this committee. I know that this has been a very stressful time and certainly a challenging budget session. We have a limited amount of time before us now. In fact, I think about 24 hours. This committee's been formed for all of 12 hours. We are committed to getting this budget done for the people of Wyoming and for the people watching closely in this room. So let's get to work.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I would just echo that time is a concern, and I think we have we certainly have the people here at the table that can, on both sides, that I think we can get stuff done. What I'd like to do, members of the committee, is I'd like to ask staff, Mr. Richards, if he would just kind of share with us what it means to be a free committee or a second committee, history on that, and kind of what that picture looks like as regarding our ability and what we're required or limited to do. Mr. Richards, if you would, please.
Good morning, members of the committee. My name is Don Richards, Budget and Fiscal Administrator for the Legislative Service Office. This is Joint Committee number 2 on House Bill 1, Senate File 1. You are no longer constrained by the limitations of the first committee, which is not a free committee. I did have an opportunity to look back in history, and the last time I could identify this occurring was the 1999 budget, which occurred in the 2000 budget session. The House and Senate both went to a free committee. What that means basically is you are no longer constrained to operate within the two positions between the House and the Senate. Other amendments outside of those two boundaries are full purview. Of course, the constitutional limitations on the budget still remain, but by way of example, the first agency is the governor's office. Administration, you elected, the JAC elected to appropriate $9.1 million. You could increase that by an unlimited amount. You could decrease that down to 0 if you so chose. Every footnote that is put in the budget bill is subject to your revision, an amendment, or deletion, or addition to that. The prior committee in 2000 on the 1999 submission by the governor did address every single amendment that was adopted by both the House and the Senate, meaning they did either delete or adopt every prior amendment. And we would encourage you to do the same, even if that means deleting the entire JCC 01 list of 133 amendments. You could just take a blanket motion if you so choose and delete them all. But that would appear in your report, and then any subsequent changes. The base budget will be the JAC, HB01, and SF1, and your actions here today, if it goes on to tomorrow or any subsequent days, would be amendments to the introduced version of House Bill 1 and Senate File 1. Does that provide you a sufficient overview, Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Richards, it does, and I think the conversation that we've had in our understanding being somewhat limited on being able to open up the budget, I think that maybe we want to consider just coming back and forego that. If there's a motion there, then I think that we would just forego any motion to do, if you will, a mini round robin and just come directly back to the Joint Appropriations Committee base budget as our starting point.
Mr. Chairman, that is my motion, to go back to the base budget, particularly in light of the composition of this committee. I think that that's a prudent start, and that's my motion.
Mr. Richards, is that just a voice vote, or is that, so it's been motioned by Chairman Nethercott, seconded by Representative Stith. The motion is that we just start with the budget bill is the base budget. Those in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed. So, Mr. Richards.
Chairman Larson, it was pretty evident at that time, but all motions here do require 3 affirmative votes on both sides. So rather than voice votes going forward, it might be, unless it's unanimous, it might be useful to a show of hands.
We just as well learn. So let's take that vote again. All of those in favor by the raise of hand. And those opposed, if any. Thank you. We're learning.
Mr. Co-Chair,
Yes.
I do have a question, Don. So when we put, and if we put together a budget, walk us through the steps on the floor of each house. Is it an open discussion down there where that they can make a motion to delete the gov's budget, similar to us? So how, explain the floor duties.
So after the negotiations of this committee, it will require at least 3 members of the House and at least 3 members of the Senate to sign the Joint Conference Committee Report number 2. That report will be sent back this year following the numbering tradition. This will be a House bill. It will be House Bill 1, will adopt all of your negotiations and be reported simultaneously to both the floor of the Senate and the House. It is a report. And that report is not amendable. It is an all or nothing vote. Typically, the members of this committee will spend a fair bit of time, sometimes 15 minutes, sometimes 2 hours, explaining the negotiations, depending on how complicated things get, to your members, responding to questions that your colleagues may have about the resolutions and the decisions that you're making here today and in future days. And then there is a final vote to adopt or deny that report. That is the final vote on the budget on both sides. If that fails, there is an opportunity, and that's kind of what happened in 2000, there's an opportunity to appoint a third committee. They did not have a third committee, but their first vote was unsuccessful. And you could come back here and make further amendments and revisions if you so chose, but it is not an amendment activity that occurs on the floor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Don. So then could you kind of tell us with what we've had on the summary sheet, the differences between the House and the Senate? Just kind of, and I think we have the summary sheet. I think we could just kind of give us an idea of how many that are the same, some that are related, and the number that are different. And then I will kind of make a determination on what we want to do.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, the House adopted 70 amendments. The Senate adopted 63 amendments. That gets us a total of 133 amendments that are in play. 13 amendments on both sides. A total of 26 amendments are identical. They appear on the first page of the HB0001 report. Occasionally, we will have some minor language revisions and have a slight preference for one side or the other, a comma or whatnot. There are none of those issues this year. It makes no difference whether you elect to select the Senate or the House position, and as a free committee, you can delete all of those if you so desire. In terms of related amendments, there are about 25 related amendments. Sometimes those amendments are, and the reason I say about is there's subjectivity associated with that. A great example of a related amendment is the military land transfer outside of Guernsey. The first portion of that amendment, footnote number 1 to the military department, is identical. The second portion of that amendment has a different fund for the deposit of those revenues. The Senate position is to deposit those revenues in the corpus. The House position is to deposit those revenues in the Common School Permanent Land Income Fund. So there's very close, but still a difference associated with that. And then you have about 80 or so amendments that are non-identical, non-related, meaning they don't have either an opportunity for the other body to have discussion on that amendment, it's a new concept, or that it was offered on the alternative body and denied. It was not adopted. In terms of the amount of funding difference, there is some nuance or challenge in specifying exactly how much money we're talking about, and so I just want to comment on that a little bit. The reason being is twofold. Number one, particularly on the House side, there is some expenditure of previously appropriated dollars. Funding that had been appropriated for one purpose was not spent and is available to be reappropriated for another purpose. A good example of that is the House's amendment for the use of reversions for broadband in the amount of $25 million. In our governmental accounting, we do not count that as another appropriation because we would be double counting. It's already been appropriated once. We don't count it as a second appropriation. On the Senate side, there are a series of amendments related to the spending policy and the SIPA account, which are based upon a forecast, a what-if investment income met 5% or 4% or 6%, and we're calculating an estimate of the fiscal impact of that. So these numbers are not precise. It would be nice if we could just say the Senate spent $12 and the House spent $6 and left it at that. But there are some fun movements. There's movements of money from one pocket to the other pocket. There's forecasting issues, and there's appropriation of previously appropriated funds. With those caveats being said, we believe that there's all funds, there's approximately a 1.1 billion with a B dollar difference between the House side and the Senate side, with the Senate cutting approximately $750 million and the House adding approximately $350 million. Now, one initial caveat there, which I don't think is a great way of assessing this, and that is with respect to the capital construction bill, or House Bill 135. House Bill 135 provided for state capital construction, not school capital construction. It was included in the governor's recommendations. That was included in the Joint Appropriations Committee recommendations. It failed the 2/3 introduction vote on the House side, but it is included in all of the totals that we have been using historically. That includes approximately $223 million, all funds, inclusive of federal funds and other funds. And the House side has elected to add back capital construction in their bill. The Senate side has elected not to, at least as of today. So if you take into account those left pocket, right pocket movements and capital construction, House Bill 135, the differences are somewhat more narrow, meaning that the House spent $121 million and the Senate has cut $749, almost the same amount as I previously mentioned, because of the Senate took no action on capital construction. Sorry for the long-winded response, but there's some contextual issues here.
Thank you, Mr. Richards. Any questions to staff? Mr. Richards, before we continue on? So Madam Co-Chairman, we feel that it would be helpful if we could get some of the more significant differences settled first. Requires more staff to get writing and stuff done. Do you have any thoughts on how you'd like to approach that, or I think we're at that point that we maybe ought to start whittling away at this. So any thoughts you got would be appreciated.
Mr. Co-Chair, I do think that's the right course, is to start with the big differences and whittle it down. If you want to identify some of those things that you believe are appropriate for our consideration, because we were just appointed 12 hours ago, we have not had an opportunity to meet together before coming into this committee meeting. And so perhaps just some general thoughts from the co-chairman, and then I would ask that we be allowed to take a recess and meet together privately as a committee.
So I think that's a great idea, you know, just Mr. Richards identified, we've got CapCon, school CapCon, we've got the energy, there's a variety. I'm not trying to drive that horse. So, Madam Chairman, why don't we go ahead and break, and then we'll be over here, and pending, when you're ready, let us know, and we'll move forward.
Mr. Co-Chair, and for members of the public who are watching with earnestness, if you give us about maybe 40 minutes or so, come back around 9 o'clock-ish, and I'll let you know if we need additional time and if that will be delayed.
Thank you. So, Mr. Richards, we'll adjourn till 9. Thank you. The, for those who are watching, are we online okay? So those who are watching online and those who are here, the Senate is working through some proposals. We need to bear in mind that we've got the Senate President and 2 members of the Appropriations Committee that's familiar with the bill, and then 2 new people that there's a little learning curve. And so we'll be ready for some, I think, some further conversation at noon, but they would like to have the rest of, as we get ready to till 10 o'clock to work through some of their process and learning process. So we're going to go ahead and adjourn, and we'll meet at noon, knowing that we'll go grab some lunch, bring it here, and probably 12:30-ish if we all get out at noon. So if you would please be the messenger.
Mr. Co-Chair, thank you, and thank you very much for the indulgence. We're sorry, but as the good co-chair said, that we're just working through some stuff, but we wanted to make sure we had enough time to get everybody comfortable, and we can bring you some good tangible offers that you guys can take a look at. So thank you.